Welcome everyone. Welcome back to Hyperflex Huddle. I am your host Parivesh and we are huddling back once again to bring you the insights right from the experts. And today we have Sarvagya with us. So welcome Sarvagya on Hyperflex Huddle.
Hey Parivesh, thank you for having me. I'll give a quick introduction. I am Sarvagya. I work closely with Elastic in Hyperflex with teams on observability and search. So, especially around helping them modernizing their platform. So, a big part of my work usually involves hands on migration. I think that's what we will be discussing today. Tools like Splunk and Logscale to Elastic. So, I've spent a lot of time in transition phase where things are not just, technical, but also how to operate with them, how it is happening culturally. Yeah, I've seen what works, what breaks, and what people usually underestimate or overestimate when they start this journey. But yeah, I'm excited to share some thoughts today.
Right, welcome. And you touch based the topic. So yeah, the agenda for today's huddle is the migrations and how why people are migrating from a different observability tool to Elastic. And if someone is planning to do that, this session will be helpful for them. Without wasting any time, let's jump into the session. And my first question too is why exactly any organization, and especially we have been seeing this going up, the numbers are going up in the recent time, are migrating from a different observability platform to Elastic. So can you describe that?
For sure. So, according to me, what really has changed is the scale and expectation around data. So, if I talk about a few years ago, observability was mostly about troubleshooting. We have seen that. We usually go to logs, we have seen some metrics, we have seen some basic dashboards, right? But it was like reactive. Like if something breaks, you go and look at the data, you try to fix it, you try to move on. That was the main objective of observability at that
Right.
point. But I think now it is a little different. Observability and security data have become a core of how system is operating right now and how decisions are made. So if I talk about now, you've got different microservices. Now you've got different systems, you've got multi-cloud environments. On top of that, there are security teams that are handling huge amount of data in terms of telemetry as well, different types of data, right? And you need a platform that is handling, or you are expected to have a platform that is handling observability, security, compliance, sometimes even different business insight, your use cases, all of those different things into a single platform. You are expected to have that, right? And that usually creates a pressure around some of the areas. Like the main area is, I think, volume is what I think. Since data is growing exponentially, we used to have GBs. Now I've worked on a client that has like 2 petabytes of data per day as well. Now TVs are coming as well. So data is increasing, and you need to have a tool that can handle that. So this isn't just about replacing one tool with another. Like organization, I think, are stepping back and thinking, how do we design a data platform that actually scales with us? How can we change this solution? That's why I think nowadays they are more rethinking their solutions about observability and security, because things are growing in terms of data, in terms of cost is a huge factor as well. If I talk about traditional models, they used to have cost with ingestion. I think Splunk is a great example for that as well. If I talk about flexibility, Elastic, I think, offers that flexibility. That's why you can decide how you store that data, how you collect the data. That is why I think people are rethinking their solutions. Would be the main reason.
And also, do you think that Elastic is not only limited to observability? I think it has more to offer in the closely to the in the similar cost, if I am correct. So I think that could also be a driving factor that a platform is out there which is not only limited to observability. Uh, Although other platforms do have this capability of other offering as well, but Elastic is actually kind of leading there because we how good it is in search, how and with the recent enhancement in the security and AI domain, I think this could also be the reason. What do you think?
I completely agree with that. I think even if someone is a novice or someone doesn't know how to use Elastic, you can see, you have seen Kibana. They can go there, they can see there are different things. You have observability, you have security. If I talk specifically about security, Splunk is a great example of security. It provides a like everything in security, but Elastic is now catching up to that as well, and it is offering all the other services too. So I think you have put a great point. It has all the different operations and it is putting it under a single platform. Elastic is offering that. So it is a great way of rethinking your observability solutions, your security solution in one place.
Now coming to the recent migrations that you have done, because
Mhm.
we know you have done a lot in couple of years. So can you give us like one or two examples of what you have done and what was the driving force for those clients for migrating from a different tool to Elastic?
Right. So firstly, I'll take an example of my like first migration, that was Splunk to Elastic migration. Now for Splunk, there were some pain points that I think could be the reason. I'm not sure what at that point the organization was thinking about, but I think at that point there were few patterns we see almost everywhere if we talk about these platforms. So the first thing I think was cost predictability. With platforms like Splunk, pricing was tied to how data is ingested, how much data is ingested, if I say about like that. So not only that, like there are other options as well. You calculate it based on other factors, how you have your servers, everything else. But a huge weightage was given to how much data you are ingesting. Like that works fine initially if you have a small scaled server, but as the data grows, the cost becomes a little unpredictable. So I think teams have started to reacting on either like dropping logs, either sampling the data, reducing the verbosity. They have created these trade-offs between cost and visibility. So that was one of the main factors what I'm thinking. The other thing could be there was limited flexibility, of course. At that time, now the systems have evolved to enriching data. Now it is evolved to route it differently. You can combine multiple data sources. Of course, this is possible in Splunk or other platforms as well. But Elastic is offering that flexibility really nicely. So that was one of the pain points that I think Splunk had that at that point. Other thing is performance, of course, as you mentioned. Elastic in terms of search is really good right now. So if I talk about performance at scale, everything works well at smaller volumes. Those platforms were working well, but as the data grows, I think teams started noticing slower queries. They started noticing delays in their insights, difficulty handling large time ranges. So that is why I think that could be one of the main reason at that point. So when I used to work for Splunk to Elastic migration, I have also noticed these changes. When I was doing that in the process, I've seen the changes. Like these were slower queries. I have translated them to Elastic. Now they're working a little well. So I've seen those changes. So those could be some of the pain points that led to this migration. I think that those could be some points.
So I think let's go a bit deeper into Splunk because I think again Splunk is also a very big player when it comes to security, and there's a lot of customers based out there. And when we are talking about migrating from Splunk to Elastic, because we have seen it, there are a transition happening from Splunk to Elastic. Even though Splunk is still a great tool, but we have seen this migration. So now let's talk about, so what do you think, what are the fundamental differences between Splunk and Elastic? And you can take example of security to security mapping if you want. But I want to ask you this because if let's say there is some organization who are listening to us, or maybe who are trying to gauge that whether they should make this decision or not. So what are, okay, we know there will be some performances, that they can review and everything, but in terms of their technical capabilities and everything, so what are the fundamental differences that comes into picture if you're moving from Splunk to Elastic?
That's a good question. So, as you mentioned, I think Splunk is a very strong platform. It has been a leader in this space for years, especially in security and logs analytics. Like a lot of organizations still rely on it heavily, and that is for a good reason. We cannot debate on that. That is definitely there. But there are some fundamental differences between Splunk and Elastic, which I think Elastic have a upper hand slightly there. As I mentioned, first thing is Splunk is primarily ingestion based. So the more data you send in, the more you pay. It has a weightage there. It is very straightforward, but it is very tightly coupled with a data volume. That's where a little friction starts because today data doesn't grow linearly. As I mentioned, we are seeing explosions in data, right? So that is where I think Splunk has a little drawback in terms of data when you calculate it based on ingestion. But Elastic approaches this differently. Of course, Elastic also sees, like, also have a pricing based on ingestion, but it has also other factors too. So we can divide it amongst those, and you still pay for infrastructure, of course, but you have more flexibility in it. You see how your data is stored, you see how your data is retained, how long you have retained. We have seen cases like we have index lifecycle policies, we have different tiers, we know how to retain those data, how it is tiered. So instead of saying can we afford to ingest this, we usually ask how do we store it, how do we manage it efficiently, right? So that shift alone changes how teams thinks about data. Second big difference could be of scalability. I think Splunk can scale. It often requires like a planning, a careful licensing alignment as you grow. But Elastic, on the other hand, we have seen it. We can scale it horizontally. We can scale it vertically. Usually, if we talk about a huge scale up, we do that horizontally from the start. You can add more nodes, you can add system that distributes your data, you can have different queries that is handling all those different nodes. Now it is really smooth at that process too. uh, that could be one difference. Now, as I said, another huge difference is, because I've seen that when I was migrating, is how we are handling that data. In Splunk, there is schema on read. You can ingest data quickly and figure things out later. You just put your data inside Splunk and then you see how it will work based on your queries afterwards. That is powerful. Of course, like early on, you find the use with it. But as system grows, I think it becomes harder to manage the consistency and the performance. Elastic, on the other hand, encourages a bit structure from the very start. We have seen ingest pipelines. We see how those processing is working right now. You pass your data during ingestion. You define all the fields. You define it more cleanly, more consistently. You have your ECS schema there. There is a schema defined for Elastic per se to have all the different fields from different data sources. It is already defined. You follow certain rules. You can enrich your data early on. If you need that these data need something, some add-ons, you can enrich that. So by the time you query it, everything is already organized. So that kind of differences, I think, can play a major role. It's kind of like Splunk, you store first, you interpret later, but in Elastic, you structure early, you query faster later. I think that is the one of the main reason fundamentally. Yeah, those are some main reason.
I think, and that's a very good point, because you ingest once, right? But
Hmm.
you search many times. And Elastic is mainly focusing on, okay, even though we you may feel that ingestion is a bit slower compared to just putting everything into your system, but that pain is worth, because once everything is structured, when you have a rigid schema, you know what you are searching on. So you can also, you don't need to search like your whole data set. You can break it down into small chunks, and then you know your structure search will be faster. So I think that pain is worth, and that's where it's what you can say, the base of search is playing in Elastic.
Completely, that is what I'm saying, like exactly my point. You have to have some trouble while ingestion. You have to have some constant foreseeing, like I need my data like this, it should follow this. But afterwards it is a smooth road. Definitely, I agree with that.
Right. So you mentioned ECS. Can you tell a bit more about what ECS is for the viewers?
Right. So in Elastic, there is a predefined certain rules that it is following when we are talking about ingestions of certain fields. So let me rephrase it how I should put it. So the full form ECS firstly is Elastic Common Schema, and it is basically a standard way of structuring your data. We have already defined a way of common data how we should structure it. So what usually is ECS, actually what problems ECS solve is, in most of the environments, data comes from certain applications, certain servers, certain services, certain tools. We know that. Certain network devices. We know that. So the problem here is each of these sources have source log data differently. Like for example, if I say one system might say source IP as SRP IP, or some can say source IP entirely. You can have different names for that, right? Now, if I imagine querying it across all the data in Elastic, we have different field names also. So it will be really troublesome. So what we did, we have already standardized it. So ECS usually, instead of having 10 different field names for the same thing, you have one simpler common name that we are using. So for, as I said, the example of source IP, it is source.ip for source IP. We similarly have destination IP, we have user.name, we have host name, we have different things. We all know that. So those things were already defined. And now suddenly queries, I think, can be simpler. We know that these field, I already know this field is named like this. Once we know that, we can reuse those fields, we can have simpler queries. So I think why this matters is, without ECS, I think you're guessing field names, you're writing custom queries, you're defining your own thing, everything is on real time, everything you have to adjust constantly. But with ECS, you can write in one query, you can apply it amongst different data sets, because everything that is coming, we have named it source IP. So everything just works basically. So it is just an idea of already defining things, already making it standard.
Right. And also, I think, so let me tell you how I came across ECS for the first time. So I was working with APM data, and I was, thinking, I was actually going through the distributed tracing. And that's where, I had this question in my mind that how this actually distributed traces works and how do we correlate them. So the correlation is where I come across ECS for the first time, because having a same name for a particular category also helps you in correlating your data a lot. So especially in terms of security, when we are trying to deal with a attack or maybe a rules and everything, that's where it comes into picture very well, because we can correlate them. Is the what are the IPs that we are seeing and everything like that. So correlation is also pretty easy. And also as you said, it saves a lot of mapping and everything, that or maybe maintenance of you can say your own data set or something like that, where you know which field is for what, because it actually a pain. I have worked on some network device ingestions where we were ingesting using the provider's APIs, and every provider has a different naming convention for it. As you said, it was SRC underscore IP for one.
Mhm.
I remembered it, and for one, it's just IP. So, and we need to do a lot of parsing. So it's actually, but what we need to parse it into, or maybe change its name, we already know. So it was actually a good thing. And I think ingestion that was done using Elastic's pre-configured, or you can say out of the box integrations, are already ECS based.
Yeah, that's true. So exactly, very well put. If you have different fields, you have to have that trouble of maintaining those fields. You have to find what is the meaning of this field. But if you have that consistent field, I think you have that ease. Like, I know this field, and I know the name, I know the working, I know everything about it, because we have already defined it. Completely agree with that. And I think if I talk about, because your point was about security, which was even more interesting. Like, in security, correlation, I think, is more needed. Like, it is everything. If you're trying to answer questions like, is this IP showing up across multiple systems, if this user particularly appears in this logs or authentication system, you need to have a way, you need to have a standard way. If your data isn't standardized, I think you'll spend half of your time just figuring out what this field means. So there, I think we need quick answers there, and I think ECS could be really helpful there. Yeah, I
Right?
agree.
Because it helps in aggregating the data a lot.
Yeah,
I just
that's true.
thought of this. So I mean, yeah. So we have discussed actually the differences between Splunk and Elastic. I know there's a lot. It's hard to put it in like in a quick sync, but yeah, you have discussed the main one. We'll discuss about the more migration, how you need to plan your migrations in a bit. But what was uh, what was the other tool that you have recently migrated? We have discussed on Splunk. Let's touch on that one a bit, and then we'll move to the planning of the migration.
Right. So I have actually also worked, like, my recent client was on Logscale and they decided to move to Elastic. So for anyone who hasn't worked with Logscale or doesn't know about Logscale, basically Logscale originally was from Humio, and now it is a part of CrowdStrike. And it is a platform that really optimize your high speed log ingestion and works with real time analytics a lot. Like, I've seen the queries, they are doing everything real time, they are creating multiple fields real time, they are dealing everything on in real time. They don't care about your stored data or anything. Everything was real time. A lot of things were real time, at least. So it is very strong with that. When your primary use case is like ingesting, firstly have a large volume of logs, then searching them quickly, but you have some kind of real time troubleshooting. You need that. So it does that really well. But in terms, Elastic is a little different there, but it is still covering all those like features, and it is still fast. You can create real time here as well. You can have all the other features as well, and both are working really good. So yeah, Logscale usually deals with this very strong depth in logs. Like if I talk about my client, I have certain queries which I was translating. Now in Logscale, they were using functions inside functions. They were chaining functions. They were using CSVs that was outside Logscale, and they were pointing it out here. They have created a really messy, complicated query. When I tried to convert that in Elastic ESQL, it was nearly a 1200 lines of query. It was still working. Yeah, but it was it was a huge query, and they had some kind of data inconsistency because other query was on QA, or this query was on QA ESQL1, and that was one on prod. So they had some data inconsistency between the systems, but it was still working and it was fine. We can replicate that, but it was a huge deal to maintain, of course. But yeah, that is one example. So Logscale like deals with complicated stuff, but we can do that in Elastic as well, really fast.
And was it any difference between the speed? Was Elastic any good or
So
competitive to Logscale?
yeah, here actually I have to give a edge to Logscale because it has certain way of using data. It was pointing to CSV. It was easier to pass through that CSV, and I had to create all the values of CSV in the query itself. So Logscale had a little edge there. It was winning definitely, but Elastic was able to keep up basically. But yeah, we had to translate it that way. We should have optimized it more. Ask the client as well, do we have certain use case of this query, should we optimize it, do we even need that, should we divide it among small queries? But it, like, the client says you can do it right now, we will deal with it later, just convert it right now for us. So I just converted it. But yeah, I'll give an edge there to Logscale.
So again, then I need to circle back to my first question. Now let's
Mm-hmm.
say your client knows, okay, maybe Logscale is performing a bit better. Still, why do they want to migrate?
Right. So I think common reason of considering moving from Logscale to Elastic, one of the biggest driver is what I think. Basically I got this client in midway. They have already decided to migrate, and they just wanted me, like, help me with this migration. I
Hmm.
was not questioning them, why should I help them? Why are you like thinking of migrating? I just said, yeah, of course I'll help you. So for me, I think one of the biggest driver was consolidation. Consolidation, what I mean by consolidation is their team often starts with Logscale for logs, but then they end up with another tool for matrix, another tool for tracing, another tool for security. This is what I felt when I talked to the team. They were managing everything. All of that becomes like really complex. They were asking this question: can we bring everything to a single place? They had that question in mind, and I think we all know that's where Elastic becomes really attractive. It has everything in one place. You can, like, I have worked on alerts as well. Logscale had alerts too. It was really nice, it was working too, but here their whole team agreed, like, these alerts are really nice. We wanted it like that. We wanted this to be webhook, we wanted this to be our email connector, everything, like, they were agreeing with that. So organizations want to, like, have a single place. So instead of switching to multiple tools together, they wanted it under single platform. So that was one of the main driving reason for switching to Elastic in this particular use case.
Right. Yeah. Now let's say a particular organization is has decided, like you said, that okay, we want to move from a particular tool, a particular offering from to Elastic. How should they plan it? What are the key factors they should keep in mind while planning it, and basically how they can plan their migration journey and plan in a way that they don't have any surprises in their midway, because it would be very hard for them. Okay, we came midway and now we have this surprise. So it should not be the case like that. So how they can have a robust plan ready, because you have done a lot of migration, so now you know.
Yeah, no, so I'll tell you one thing here. They had spent like a lot of time in planning. Still, for each of the client, they were still facing the issues. they were still surprised by something or the other. So there was no standard way. Like, of course you can minimize that, but they were one thing or the other. You cannot just remove everything. So I'll tell you some of the best practices to keep in mind while before starting a migration, and to have while you are doing the migration, how you should proceed there. So firstly, first thing and foremost thing is understand your data. For each of my client, whether it be Splunk to Elastic migration, whether it be Logscale to Elastic migration, both, we first started with data itself. We had a team separately working on what exactly do we need, how do we need our data, how critical it is, what data sets have high values. We need to ask those questions beforehand. Do we even need this data? What is happening right now? Basically, data wise, you have to be, you have that, you like, you need that clarity. And so after you have a clear goal, like these are the data sources we are ingesting, these are just the setting ones, these are some critical dashboards. After you have that clarity, you can move on to next step. First you need to have that list, because I've seen in my recent client, they were not sure what we need to move, and they had a deadline, still they were delaying it. They couldn't even streamline it. So firstly, you'll have to define clear goals about your data. Secondly, clear goals about everything else as well. Do we need a cost reduction? Do we need better performance here? What are our end goals? You need to have that in mind prior to the migration. Of course, there are certain things you cannot control, like some performance, like some query performance could still be slow. But you need to have an idea. If we are moving to Elastic, we are expecting certain queries to work faster. We are expecting certain tools to have a single place where we can go there. We will have to have some influence in every decision you make, based on architecture, based on your data retention, based on your pipeline design, everything. So you need to have that. This is what I'm talking about before migrating. You just need a plan right now. I think third point could be, you need to prioritize certain use cases instead of systems. So what I mean by that is, I have seen there was a common mistake amongst both of the clients that I was recently working with. They were trying to migrate everything at once. They, if I talk certainly in data, one of the client had 800 applications. They called that mnemonics in Logscale. They called me. They said, we have this 15-20 mnemonics we want to be prioritizing. I said, okay. But they had that 800 and they want to convert all of them. And there is no way, by the deadline, they had like June deadline, and there is no way they can achieve that. I know that. So you have to prioritize with what you want to migrate. You have to give use cases. You have to give a specific team, a specific data source. You have to have that plan. So this is all the things that they can manage. They should manage beforehand. But if I talk about what is the exact process and how we should, like, what are the best practices while you're doing the process, I think one of the main thing is, in my use case, the troublesome part was query translation. It was the, like, really hard part, complicated part. You can manage the ingestion part. So there, I'm dividing it amongst two part. There is an ingestion part. You have an old system, you have all the data there, there is historical data there. You are moving that data to a new system as well, and you are pointing all your sources to the new system as well. That is how we are migrating. So to handle that ingestion data, for this example, we have used Logscale. We have created the pipeline. That is, I think, a little straightforward, a little consistent process. So we can deal with that. But for query translation, because what I mean by query translation, the old system has some kind of alerts, some kind of dashboards that you want it in the new system with all the new data, or the old data, anything, like all the data. So these query translations usually have like certain nitpicks, like old queries used to have it like this way, they want it like this way. You have to have a clear image, like, I want it optimized, I want to have it this way. Like, you cannot have, in midway you cannot decide to have it a certain way, another way. You have to have a, like, image for that. So this process was a little tedious. Of course, they were like, they were pushing it, they had a deadline, they wanted certain results. But yeah, this is a complicated process there. So at the end, I just wanted to say, like, you have to have a certain plan in terms of what you need, how your data should be looking, what exactly is critical. You should plan that. You should have a list of all the fields that you are moving. These are the fields used in this certain dashboard. You should have multiple sheets. I worked around sheets, I've created those sheets as well. You should have everything planned, because even if after, like, I have moved those 15 mnemonics, 15 application, I have moved those. but they have 800 other applications. So after me gone, they wanted it to be a consistent process still. So I have to create those sheets, I have to maintain everything. Without it, there is no way they can do it in time. So these are some practices I think they should keep in mind.
Also, I think the first thing that anyone who is dealing with, or any organization that who is dealing with migration, is that you need to understand that this will take some time. It's not very faster process. Let me tell you one example. So I was working with this client, and so I actually helping them understanding Elastic better in their Elastic day-to-day life and day-to-day work. And
Mhm.
they were touching a lot of features in Elastic. So we are not even finished with what we were solving today, and tomorrow they come up with a different problem, a different that. So one day I was just like chatting with the guy I was working with, and I said, why are you in such a hurry that you need to, you want everything? Let us finish what we have in our plate right now, and then we can go on to the different part, because we know it's not related, it's not even flagged some prioritize on the ticket and everything. But why? So they said we need to migrate from Dynatrace to Elastic. They were on Dynatrace, and
Mhm.
so I think they were just around like 3 to 4 months when their renewation of their Dynatrace subscription was due,
Right.
and they don't want to do that. Looking at the size, I was like, I don't want to demotivate you, but there is no way you can do this much of migration in just 4 months, because right now you don't even understand Elastic better. So when that's you need to plan. You cannot just say, okay, we don't want to do a subscription. You don't want to go with dual subscription, so let just migrate everything. It don't work that way. So clear planning is actually important. And with this story, I have one question with you. Maybe I will also touch some point after your answer. So
Mhm.
in this migration journey, or in any, how we come into picture, like Hyperflex as an organization, because you were working with a client. We are saying this a lot, like with my client, with your client. What are these? Where we come into picture, and how we can ease this migration journey? So I want your
Right.
take.
Yeah. So before I tackle that question, I first want to agree with what you said. Like that is a huge problem with organizations. My first migration took like 11 months, and they were planning it for like 4 to 5 months. They had no idea like it will take such a huge period. This recent migration also, they started planning it beforehand. They were in September, I think they planned it. They were the expiring date was in June, and they were planning it like 6 to 7 months earlier as well. But still it got delayed. It is still not happening right now, and I don't think they will be able to achieve it. It will get delayed as well. So it is a really huge process. I completely agree with that. Now coming to your questions, where Hyperflex comes into picture, what are our roles? So typically it, when they realize like this is a bigger picture than just a tool change, they are moving multiple parts, they are making mistakes. That's where we usually handle those mistakes for them. So firstly, we bring that clarity. You have to have a realistic planning. These are some certain factors that you should take care of. As I said, one of the major part was query translation. They were using me day and night for that query translation. So basically, for example, if I take Logscale has a query language, LQL, Logscale query language, which has all the queries written. The dashboard has in background working on LQL, and you have to translate that to ESQL, Elasticsearch Query Language. Now, certain functionalities are different, certain syntaxes are different. They are using aggregation in a different way. We have to handle that. I say my major role was of this only. Other than planning, other than everything else, this was a huge toll for them. This was a tedious process for them. It was really like trouble for them. So they have utilized me in that way, this particular client for Logscale. But of course, our major role is to give them an idea. Is it like realistically possible? What should be prioritized? What can wait? If there is any kind of optimization that is possible, of course, we'll tell that. Like your old setup was fine. There is a reason you are migrating from it. The new setup should look like this. It has this potential. We have to give them an idea of that. Second thing, I think avoiding some of the common pitfalls, we should like navigate there. We should give them a light there. Like when teams are migrating on their own, I think they try to replicate everything exactly. They try to overcomplicate pipelines. That is where we shine, because we have worked on migration before, because we have that proficiency with Elastic. I think that is where we know, like, this works, this doesn't. This is where it usually breaks. So we have to give them that clarity. Of course, the third thing is, I think, KT, the learning curve is a big thing. In my story, the team was still exploring all the features. They had been working for Logscale. They had been working on Logscale for a while now. All the members were of Logscale only. They don't even know a single feature about Elastic until I showed up. They didn't know anything. So knowledge transfer was a huge part of it. And that's natural. Like, during migration, it can be a slow thing. Of course, we help those teams focus what features matters right now. You have dashboards here, you have alerts here. These can be ignored right now. You will use them in future, but right now you don't need this right now particularly. And then how to use Elastic effectively for your use case, we have to tell them. So instead of like learning everything randomly, we usually guide them, these are relevant for your migration. That is one point. And I think last point I'll just quickly touch is forming that right foundation for them. As I said, if they were using certain kind of pipelines before, if they were using certain kinds of field mappings before, certain kinds of retention strategies, index design, anything, you have to give them that clarity that you use this data pipeline here, you use Logstash here for this data ingestion, you use this certain kind of field mappings there, you use this for this data, you just need retention of this. So you create that planning. If that is done wrong, or if they haven't thought about that before, it will be a pain later, of course, and it will be a difficult process to fix it. Right now we are in migrating process. Right now we know that these things should change. In the changing process, we can fix that. After all the things are settled, it is really difficult to touch that again. Basically ensuring this smooth transition, we usually give them all the strategies, all the validation strategies. Validation is a huge point. After all the query is translated, you have to have a strategy for validation. The exact user that is using that dashboard should know how he wants that dashboard to be. I don't know how they want that dashboard to be. I just know a certain use case, this was the query, but they have a daily use case with that dashboard. They know I usually touch base with this panel. I want it for this timestamp. They know that. I don't know that, like, what they are touching. So at the time of validation, we both need to come in a single place. We need to decide, okay, you want it this way, I'll change it. Instead of line chat, you can easily use bar chat here, something like that. So these smooth transition, I think this is where we shine. This is where we come into play, and this is where we help.
Right. Right. Yeah. Now, let me also add up to that. So we
Mhm.
can break this into two phases, right? First is the planning, and second is the execution. So
Mhm.
I think at Hyperflex, again, we offer a lot of offerings that can be checked on our website. But to, let's say, in planning, what we can help is that to give you the exact and appropriate estimate, because as you said, there's a knowledge almost every time there is a, because the engineers, they are working on a particular tool, they are very familiar with that. So for example, if they are working with Logscale, they know Logscale in and out because they are working with it. Now when they are planning migration, they tend to estimate Elastic either based on what they know about Logscale. Okay, this thing should take this much of time, or maybe they want to have this one-on-one mappings where we can do. So what you, they just know, okay, there's no guarantee that if certain thing is done in a certain way on Logscale, it needs to be done in the same way in Elastic. Maybe there is a better way, you don't know it, and you won't gonna explore it because you just wanted to have it migrated. So the better way will be, you can outlook and you won't be looked there. So that's where we come into picture. We can give you the exact picture. Okay, this is how you should do it in Elastic. Also, this will take this much time for sure. As I said, I knew in 4 months they couldn't have done that, but they were planning because they were thinking in terms of dynatrace way. They know, so they don't have any familiar with familiarity with Elastic at that much of time. Also, again, let's take an example. If you plan to migrate today, and so first of all, you need to make your technical team aware of Elastic. You need to train your engineers, at least some good amount of engineers, they can handle the migrations. This is where we come into picture. We can do the migration for you, also we can teach you in a way in the meantime. So having an experts on who have done elastic, work with migrations, who know elastic in and out, actually helps you to guardrail your efforts. Otherwise, so you don't need to just search, okay, how this thing's implemented elastic and then implement it. And there's no way you can guarantee it's the correct way, because if you're going to see a lot all the options and then choose one, it will take, I think, like 6 or 6x, because you need to try every way and decide first what works best. This is where we come into picture. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think we can help in execution, faster execution, because we have done this many times. So
Mhm.
execution will be faster and planning will be accurate. So yeah,
Completely agree.
that's what I can say.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
like the example you gave. Like, this is exactly what happened with me. There was certain stuff they just wanted it to be migrated. We provide an optimization there. So it is spot on. Like, this is exactly what happened with me. We sat, we discussed, like, you can either use it this way, you can do it that way. And they agreed. Like, yeah. Of course, they haven't touched Elastic very precisely, very specifically. Like, we can even achieve that. They don't know that. So we have to help them there. I completely agree with that. Yeah.
right. Now, coming on to the last part is that after migrating, you have migrated to Elastic. First, what are the improvements that a team typically sees once they have
Mhm.
migrated? You said the queries will be faster and everything, but what are the typical improvements that a team sees when they migrate from a different platform to Elastic? The wow factor also, and even after migrating, what they can continue on doing it to use elastic at its fullest.
Right. So I think I'll go back to the fundamentals here. The first thing, like most teams notice, is control. Before migration, a lot of decisions are driven by constraints like cost. After moving to Elastic, teams feel like they can actually make decision based on what they need, not what they can afford. So of course,
Mhm.
better cost control is definitely there. Improved performance, if I touch base that again, queries that used to take a long time, there are exceptions. In Logscale, that particular query had an exception. It was using CSVs outside Logscale. It was calling multiple functions. So to replicate that on Elastic, it can be slower. But a majority of time, I can say that for sure, Elastic will give you an improved performance in terms of search. That is definite. So the queries that used to take a long time, especially across like a large data set, becomes much faster, much more consistent. The other thing is, I think retention should be there as well. Teams are no longer need to like delete the data that they were keeping before aggressively, because we can retain it longer. We have that factor as well. But this is not a point that particularly Elastic offers. It can be of any platform. One thing is, of course, of being a flexible platform that we have touched based again and again, because that is an highlight of Elastic. We know that. So it is not just an upgrade, it is like moving from a restricted environment to a really flexible one. So Elastic does offer that. It offers better in terms of observability, in terms of security, in terms of search cases in one place basically. So everything is improved little by little, and everything is there in one place. So I think that is like the major difference that they see after migration. They can see the work. Of course, we have really good dashboards. That is one specific point that I should mention. Splunk used to create dashboards that were not as pretty, not as functional. When I created the same dashboard in Elastic, I was shocked itself. Like, wow, this is great. This is what they need right now. So Elastic definitely offers that in specifically in Splunk, not in Splunk only, in Logscale as well. Logscale was offering certain types of dashboards, certain types of alerts. When I translated them in Elastic, it was a different result, definitely better result. So we have that end-to-end visibility. Again, you have that security features as well. You have certain kind of things, and all of that in one place. So I think those are the certain differences that teams notice after the migration.
I completely agree to you on the part of the beautified dashboard. That's the review I got when I showed them the Kibana dashboard. Everyone is like, these are really beautiful. So anybody who has seen Kibana dashboard will agree with me. If you have not seen, I would highly recommend you to at least try. These are very beautiful dashboard. And the other thing which I heard is that how easily it is to navigate between the offerings. You are dealing with some observability part and suddenly you need to go and check some security. It is very easy because it's a single and unified platform. It's really easy to just navigate between the offerings. And the last thing that I noticed, once they migrated and they start using elastic for their use cases, they come to know it is not limited to that. So that's the first this is the most you can say common feedback that we have got. We
Mhm.
have there those who are migrated for, like anyone who was migrated for observability, and they started seeing the platform. They say they know we can do this as well, and that's the real where point where elastic shines, because it has so much to offer, especially in security. I won't go into depth, but there was a feature of timeline. If someone has seen and how it was, so elastic has done this build feature on top of its own feature. So they were discovered, now they see was so user use discover in a certain way. They made logs explorer on top of discover, and then they say, okay, on security usually they correlate logs, they correlate incident metric, they create a timeline. So they are keep on adding the features. Those are really cutting edge, and I don't think any the other platform offers this kind of stuff. So really, if you are thinking to elastic, the bottom line that we can say is you are thinking in the right direction.
Definitely. That is true. I completely agree with that point. I have seen certain features as well. Like if I just talk about controls, that is a really minute, a small feature which we provide in dashboards to control certain panels. But it is there in Splunk as well. It is there in Logscale as well. But the UI, the effect, the functionality in Elastic is specifically very different and very useful. The client have agreed like this is amazing. So Elastic has been like that way. It is upgrading day by day, all the newer versions, all the breaking changes. It is keeping up with all the changes. So I completely agree. And once they are on Elastic, they start exploring all these new use cases they couldn't support before. So the value isn't just in like saving money, have that performance. They are unlocking all the new capabilities, which they love, of course. So yeah, that is there.
Right. All right. Thank you, Sarvagya, for showing the light and throwing the light on this migration journey. I hope for the listeners it has added some value, and we really appreciate your insights and your time. For the listeners, please do follow us on our social media platforms, especially on YouTube. We host this kind of podcast every week, so there's more coming. You will need to learn a lot about Elastic. So please follow us. And for any professional services regard, if you're thinking of migrating, please check out our professional services in migrating. We can really help you to ease out your journey. And yeah, till the next time. See you. Bye bye.